All right, we're live. What's going on? I'm here with Charles Starr. Great to have you on, Charles. Why don't you introduce yourself to the group really quick? Tell everyone a little about yourself and what you do.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. So, as you just said, my name's Charles Starr. I have previously exited a seven-figure marketing agency, and I did that by starting that company when I was actually delivering pizzas for a company called Donato's, just standard pizza company down in Ohio. Exited that company about 4 years ago. Now I do a little bit of new agency coaching really out of passion. And I have various marketing offers that I launch in a few different niches. Right now, the biggest one is landlords.
Oh, awesome. So yeah, I'm curious to like hone in on your early story because you're talking about like starting this agency when you were a pizza boy, which is epic, and kind of building it on the side to the point of selling over seven figures in marketing services. So that's amazing. Can you kind of take us back to that starting point and what made you get into it?
Oh man, that I got to take me back to that, right? So slightly before the joining the pizza company, I actually worked as a freight broker, and I've done a lot of stuff in mental health for many, many, many years. Huge advocate of that, right? But I was working as a freight broker, and one of the gentlemen in the back who worked for the company, he didn't own the company, he didn't have shares, he wasn't a partner, anything like that. He made over $1 million take home commissions every year by doing just brokering freight, buying from here, selling from here, there, etc. And he had to ask to take vacations. Imagine making a company $4 million and having to have your vacation rubber stamped by somebody else. As soon as I heard that, I'm like, this 9 to 5 thing is not going to work for me. So I'm like, what can I do that I can bring the skills I have, which at the time was sales from my work in, date coaching, mental health movement, etc., and really kind of take that. And I had a buddy, he said, "You're not going to believe this, Chuck, but you can make $25 an hour." And this is back in 2016. So that was a really fair amount of money just delivering pizzas. He's like, "But you have to walk in there because after they see your resume, nobody's going to hire you. They're going to think you're way too overqualified." So I literally had to walk in and pitch my case to be a pizza boy. I had to secure that job as my first sale to actually become an agency owner and move ahead. So
That
it's man, that was a bit wild. So I would go, standard pizza things, right? You'd go to the shop, you'd pick up two, three, four pizzas, you go out to the various locations that you were delivering them, you drop them off and come back. And I would do a shift sometimes at, from 10 to noon or 11 to 1, and you come away with $60 in cash, which was pretty great. But then I'd get off those calls, I'd go home, I'd change, I'd sit in front of my computer, I'd do some Zoom calls, I'd do some prospecting, and then I would get some clients to sign up. They say, "Yes, I'll pay you $5,000 a month." So then we would get these guys, I'd collect the cash, and then I'd have to go back to work at 6 p.m. delivering pizzas. And at a certain point, you have to sit down and go, "What the hell are you doing with your life?" In 1 hour, you made 5 grand, and all day over here, you made 180 bucks.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's all about leverage. And yeah, that's hilarious. Like you make a 5 grand sale, then you go make $25 an hour.
Yeah. And what's crazy about this is I would tell the folks at the pizza shop, like, "Yeah, I just closed this deal. It's really good." None of them believed me. They all thought I was lying, making things up. They
Wow.
thought I was just blowing smoke. They said, "Well, if you're doing that, why are you here?" And that was a question I continuously asked myself, right? But I had to pool some capital. I had to make sure that we had some runway and that we could actually move ahead. The one of the greatest personal moments that I've had in my journey as an entrepreneur was I wasn't by myself in this agency. I had four partners. We bought one out very early, so it went to three. And at the time, our first couple clients weren't 5 grand clients, right? They were experimenting with this thing, trying to get some commissions, just really figuring out the process. So we had about four, four or five, maybe $6,000 in the account. And one of my clients came to me and said, "We want to grow this thing. We want to make it big. We all do." And he said that we know that you are the key to doing this because you can make it rain. He said, "I want to give you all of the money in the account to cover your monthly expenses so that our agency can blow up." Now understand that that was literally betting the farm that I would,
Hmm.
and I was so touched by this, and I really wanted that, and I thought I knew how to do it, so I said yes. In that first week, we made our first $10,000 recurrings.
Wow. So kind of like this in between time, you were delivering pizzas, you knew that you could start a profitable agency. Like what was your process for getting launched? Like how did you pick your niche and kind of like hone in on your offer and just feel comfortable right out the gate being like, yeah, 5 grand a month.
And so a lot of people sit around and say, "Man, what could I do? What kind of service could I offer?" I looked at it differently. I said, "What could I offer well, and what do I have a story already of?" The agency wasn't my first business. I sold baby bibs on Amazon. I was buying them for 450 from China. I was selling them for $30 a piece until
Dang.
everybody else discovered that niche, and then it was 15, 11, 10, 9, and eventually the juice wasn't worth the squeeze anymore, right?
Hmm.
The margins were just too small. But I learned a lot from that process, and I said, well, I don't want to turn around and find another product, invest 30,000, repeat the cycle, and potentially get pushed out again because I'm not going for high leverage products. So I said, what can I do with this? And I realized that nobody knew the stuff that me and my partners knew selling on Amazon. At the time, there was no amazing selling machine. There was none of those big competitors. There was just a couple of guys with one podcast, and we said, well, why don't we reach out to some sellers and see if they want somebody to help them do this? And the response was overwhelming.
Hmm. Well, yeah, and like what you mentioned there too, your whole kind of back end strategy of like finding these niche people, and this is something that you help your students with now from what you've told me. But yeah, what was your process like for like procuring a lead list in such an obscure niche, right? Where like you can't just go find someone who's like an Amazon seller, you know?
Yeah, man, it's the more I find the more profitable the niche, the more cloak and dagger you have to be about getting the leads, right? So like you said, you can't just and go to LinkedIn and say, "Let me put in Amazon store owner." Nobody says I'm an Amazon store owner. They say, I own Furniture R Us who sells on Amazon, right? They'll say I own, Wormhole Graphic Art. I'm the CEO of Wormhole Graphic Art, but that doesn't tell you that they're actually on or interested in getting on the platform. So
Mhm.
I pretty quickly early on found out that LinkedIn was not going to be a primary source of the starting for leads. It was really good for lead enrichment, which means I have an idea of a company. I need to find out who runs that company.
Hmm.
You got to get the companies first. So I sat down and I thought, and this is what I tell everybody to do, find out where your clients aggregate. Everybody goes to the same watering hole, so to speak, in an individual niche in an individual area, either for information, to register, or to, just kind of show off their goods. In the Amazon niche, it was trade shows. It was everybody had to either find somebody to buy their wholesale merchandise, or they had to get some wholesale merchandise from other suppliers to diversify their chain, to launch new products, etc. So when I figured out that that's where companies who would be interested in selling on Amazon were, and that anywhere from 5,000 to 25,000 of them exhibited at a time, I just switched to scraping those lists. Right.
Hmm.
I had a guy in India, still work with him today, absolutely phenomenal. I said, "Hey, can you get me this information?" And he did. I would pay him, and he would get me names, emails, titles of almost every company on those lists, which wasn't particularly easy. But then I had a target base. I had anywhere from 5 to 25,000. I would scrape 3 or 4 of those lists a year. We're not talking a month, a year,
Hmm.
set those up in a campaign that at the time had about a 70% open rate and about a 6% positive reply booking rate. So I would
Hmm.
run that through, and then kind of the rest is history. Show up to the meetings.
Yeah, so you'd find these hyper targeted lists through trade shows, things like that, or just finding where the people are actually gathering, scraping that list, creating some cold email sequences that are like hyper targeted. I mean, your list size wasn't even that big from what I understand, right? It was just
Right?
very, very specific avatar.
And I want to clarify one point here, just in case somebody is a little bit confused. You actually can't find a list like that. You have to create one. What we found was you can't get a list of attendees to a trade show, but they will all tell you who's exhibiting because they want you to come and pay. So there's
Mm,
a list of exhibitors with no contact information, no nothing. But once you find something like that and enrich it, then you have an actionable list.
wow. Nice. So kind of like a kind of hidden backdoor strategy to build out your lead list. That's smart.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and there's so many different ways to gather leads to get on appointments, right? Cold outreach is one of the quickest, and that's why I like it because it allows you to validate ideas very, very quickly, and it's very cost effective.
Mm,
You make up for that sometimes on the sales side where you have to be really dialed in because they don't know you. There's not a whole lot of trust involved, which is why before you get them on a call, you have to add touch points. I think we talked a little bit the other day about how many contacts it actually takes to close somebody. And typically that's 7 to 13. Most folks stop contacting somebody, even people they've had booked an appointment with, between 1 and 3. And then they go, well, why didn't this guy buy from me? He
mm.
doesn't know you. He doesn't trust you.
Yeah, so maybe we can dig into that a little bit. So these like 7 to 13 touch points, what would you say are like the most important things in terms of messaging that these people need to see in order to kind of like warm up to you through a cold outreach touch point?
Yeah. So I don't remember where it's been many, many years. So I don't remember where this came out, but I know that it was a study from, it was either one of the Ivy Leagues or Salesforce, which in my mind is better than Ivy Leagues in terms of getting actionable information. So it
Hmm.
was a study that they put out and it directly aligned with my experience. So I've really adapted that. In terms of touch points, I'm not talking about 13 emails to their inbox that they can ignore, right? So one thing that I work with everybody I'm with on is send out the cold emails. Anybody who replies, that's now somebody you want to try to move into a hyper targeted funnel. So if they reply, you're going to begin calling them, right? I do a lot of cold calls outside the email, but particularly if they're emailing you, you want to make sure that you're cold calling them. You're at that point, it's more like a warm call, but you call them, say, hey, just got your email, really appreciate it. What kind of things do you want to know? Rather than just sending them a PDF of information, which they can go, oh, okay, and then bin after they're done, right?
Hmm.
Have a small conversation. Then later, try to get the appointment booked, either on that call or in an additional email. Once you get the appointment booked, send them a loom, right? It's so powerful. Our faces are powerful. One of the reasons that so many people were depressed and we had record numbers of just suicides and terrible outcomes in 2020 and 2021 is because we're not supposed to be deprived of seeing each
Mm.
other's faces. It literally releases dopamine. And
Mm.
once you see somebody a couple of times, you feel like you know them. There are people you probably walk down the street, you see every day, you've never talked to. Maybe you see them 4 or 5 times, but you expect them to be there afterwards, right? It's a very odd familiarity thing. There's a level of trust of, I know that person in some sense. So when you send a loom prior to actually meeting with somebody, they can see your face. They know who you are. Now they've got some emails from you, and then they've heard your voice on the phone. So they begin to build a picture of who you are as a person.
Mm.
And then it's so much easier to get on the call because it's not, is this guy going to disappear into the night with my money? Because they feel like
Totally.
they know you.
Yeah, so you've kind of built up that rapport and that trust ahead of time. What are you saying in that first email that actually like generates a reply? Because I know a lot of people who struggle with cold email who are like, oh, nobody's responding or like nobody's booking calls and the data is terrible in terms of, the replies and actual response. So what's your trick for like getting people to actually respond to you?
I don't make it, I have make it have very, very little to actually do with me. The number one problem people have with cold emails is they say, I've done this, I've done this, I've done this, I can do this for you, I can do this for you, I can do this for you, I can do this for you. And they never actually take the time to direct what they're talking about to what the client needs or might need, what they're looking for. Right? They
Mm,
talk about all of the features of their solution without directly offering the solution. right?
Mm,
So one of my keystone, and it changes depending on the niche, but the emails I go to almost consistently start with a subject line that's somewhat catchy, but is directed to a problem that I genuinely believe they have through research in either a Facebook group or a place where people complain, right? Complain about a service or a problem they have. I love forums where people complain because that teaches me so much. So I'll slap that into their subject line and say, I can help you, or, dealing with this, fix inside, right? And
mm,
then you look at the email and you start off by talk about them. Don't talk about yourself. Say, you are this and you're suffering from this, or your store isn't at seven figures, right? And this is why. First thing you have to do is take the blame off of them. So many people say, your marketing sucks. Hire me and I'll fix it. Nobody wants to be told they suck. But
mm,
surprising, if you look at your cold emails, the majority of them start that way. They're trying
mm,
to generate pain while also casting casting a verdict, casting judgment. You have to remove that from people. So you have to say, it's a very tough market. It's no wonder that your marketing is struggling to perform with so many people sending out so much messages and so much competition for attention. You think
mm.
about every biz op or course that you're listed, all of them start by removing judgment. And that's a key piece that people often don't do in their emails.
Yeah, that's huge because like if you're casting that judgment, you're kind of creating dissonance between that person and you. They'll be like, "Well, F you, you know what? Like, why are you reaching out to me?"
Right. And it's okay for people to say F you. I'm so grateful that I had about 20% of replies that I got be like, screw you, never contact me again. Sweet spot. If you're getting less than that, your message isn't polarizing enough, right?
Mm,
Love him or hate him, Donald Trump was destined to win that election because everyone had an opinion about him. They either loved him or they hated him. The only opinion that Kamala had that was consistently echoed was either she was a Democrat or what she do again. It was all about Trump. It wasn't about her. It was about who he was running against, right?
hmm.
If people are polarized and they care, it works. I would say there's no such thing about except bad press, except that's a quote that Diddy had, and we know what happened to him.
Yeah, man. So having some polarity in your emails is going to be a good thing to really hit on the pain, get someone to actually pay attention, and it's either going to be a positive or negative response. Probably depends on their own mindset around it.
And make an offer too. So many people, right? I learned this from one of my mentors years ago, Gallant Dill. It's called Cub, right? Any offer you have, ask yourself: is it common? Is it unbelievable? Or is it boring? If it's any of those three, don't run it. The amount of time people have offered me a free consulting call, 30 minutes. Uh, the worst one is free audit. Come get your free audit on your ads.
Mm.
Jesus, haven't I heard that a million times? Is it? Do I believe that you can do that? Sure, I will. But is it boring? Absolutely, it is. Right? You have to talk it up. Frank Kern does this incredibly. He also offers free sessions for his lead-ins, but how he does it is different. You hype the value of the sessions. You tell them, I want to sit down with you and we're going to look at this, this, and this. Ironically, it's the exact same thing as an audit. It's the same thing. But if you detail out the pieces, specifically what they're getting, lower their bar to entry, tell them that they're not going to be hard sold, addressing their fears around accepting the offer, and then make it easy for them to reply and accept the offer, you're off to the races.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. So you're really selling them on like the value of the call itself, what they're going to get out of it, and like why it's a good idea for them to be there.
Yeah, how many? I mean, you're obviously a CEO now. You've gone through so much. We talked a little bit about your story. How many emails a day do you get with people offering you calls?
Yeah, a ton of unsolicited services too, Trustpilot reviews, SEO, website design. I just delete all of them or unsubscribe if I can, you know. It just doesn't capture my attention.
What was the last one you actually met with?
None. Usually the only people I meet with are people that I've been following for a while who I've built up like a lot of trust and respect for and like kind of seen their journey for a period of time.
Yeah. So I find that that's one of the things with the cold emails. They do work more effectively if you have a brand, but it's all about timing, right?
Mm.
If you break your leg and you get an email that says mend your leg in 3 days, you're gonna open it. You're gonna open it.
Totally.
Right? So if you hit a problem that somebody's going to have, they're going to open it as long as they believe that your subject line is going to directly address their problem. Then it's a battle for attention. Just like a cold call, you have certain steps. You have the first 3 to 5 seconds to actually get in the call. You have the first 30 seconds to get them hooked, right? And then you have maybe a minute or two to set the meeting, get the information, etc. You really don't have longer than that. People like to treat emails like a long form sales letter, but it's the same thing. You've got to hook them. You've got to show them that what you have is going to be valuable to them. You have to address their concern. You have to make the offer, and then you have to leave.
Mm. Yeah, so do you ever lead with like more aspirational, desire-oriented content in these emails, or are you always
No,
like pain driven?
it's always pain driven. I've tried aspirational content. They had the worst open rates of anything I've ever seen. Just
Wow.
categorically. Uh, Fun fact tip for folks: women get 30% higher open rates than men. So I've had an employee, an email really named Kenzie for years and years and years, and I consistently proved that Kenzie gets more opens on email sent than I do. Right.
Wow.
So it's one of those things. It's an immutable law of emails. Aspirational is probably not going to work that well. Women get more responses. You have to make an offer if you want people to reply to you.
Brilliant. Yeah, well, that's a pretty deep dive on cold email. Some of the other things we talked about, last week, you mentioned, doing a lot of cold calling to generate business initially, and kind of like even doing some multi-million dollar deals selling through the corporate structure. So can you kind of speak to that a little bit for people who are like, how do I close the big deals? How do I find the whales?
I love this. So the first thing you do is take $100 bill and then mail it to LinkedIn. You can do that via your credit card if you're more savvy, right? But sign up for Sales Navigator. I love Sales Navigator. It's one of the tools that when you use it, it's going to pay you dividends, but it's a trigger based tool. The reason you want to sign up for that is because there's a button that says change jobs in the last 90 days. Decision makers at companies, people who are high up who can approve large deals, VPs, presidents, directors, right? That's primarily who you're looking for. Don't start lower on the corporate org than that. They change jobs every 2 years, right? They either get canned, the company goes a different direction, they get headhunted, but consistently, the stay in that company is only 18 months to 2 years. And if you look at their LinkedIn profiles, you'll see that almost everybody, it's the same.
Hmm.
They spend the majority of their budget that they have for their department because all of those have some budgetary power within the first usually 30 to 90 days. So the
Wow.
window for when they're looking for services is during that point. If you come to somebody who's been in their position 2 years, they probably already have their service provider set. So the first thing is find not when the organization needs help, because a lot of organizations need help all the time. It's when an individual is motivated and has the ability to hire you, right? If you do
Wow.
business with, let's say, Chase, you don't sign with Chase corporate, so to speak. You sign with the Chase's VP of marketing, with their VP of, of diversity, with their VP of health, whatever it is. That person has a budget, and that person approves what you're doing. Depending on the size of the deal, you may have to cobble together multiple VPs to make that work, right? That's kind of whaling, so to speak, spearing the larger deals,
Hmm.
but most VPs can have a budget themselves that they can approve up to sometimes 50 to $100,000 on projects, depending.
Wow. So you're saying you're finding these people who have like recently transitioned jobs in the last, X amount of time. They have a kind of a golden window of a budget that they actually have to spend to, see out their term and to kind of get their initiatives rolling. And so you're just capitalizing on that, just kind of right place, right time with your offer.
Yeah, you definitely want to do that, and you have to look at the corporate structure as well. When are the worst months to try to sell corporate? December and January. because people don't have a budget that's refreshed yet, right? You have an annual budget, you're allocated that budget, then you have to spend that budget. Oftentimes, they don't know what that budget is until the beginning or sometimes the middle of February. So,
Hmm.
a lot of your outreach and things in January, December, they can't necessarily be signed with me right now because they
Hmm.
have no ability to do that. What you can do is provide information, provide tips, and get something on the calendar. Make sure if you meet with somebody in those 2 months that you schedule, it's vital that you schedule a meeting for sometime at the beginning or middle of February. Get on that calendar and keep that meeting because that's when they're going to have the ability to sign up. And if they've been following you or they've believe that what you have is going to fix the problem that they have, that's when they'll be able to pay you, right? So just because somebody leaves an org and joins in December, they may or may not have budget. It's worth reaching out, but understand that they will in February. So it's important to keep that in mind.
Dang, and that's like highly specialized information. So how did you even learn that? I'm curious.
Grinding it out, man. Just days and days and days, right? You read studies. So many people ignore studies. Salesforce puts out a ton of information. They are so giving. They if they sold a PhD program, I would feel obligated to pay them for that money. Like I would have to pay Salesforce PhD for all the tuition information they've given me. It's insane. Companies will put out these studies and they have access to metadata, right? Because they own the CRM. They
Mm.
know from everybody who puts stuff into Salesforce, they have access to so much information. And that's putting aside the fact that they themselves are absolutely massive. They share that with folks for free. Sign up for their newsletter. Look at, Salesforce studies, Salesforce quotes, all kind of that information from, and that's just one example, floats around in the ether. Find that information. I'm never going to be able to make 10 billion cold calls. Doesn't matter how long I do it, that will never happen. The lifespan of a human being is not long enough to allow me to do that. But Salesforce has that kind of data, and that kind
Mm.
of data doesn't lie.
Wow, that's epic. Yeah, so just looking behind the scenes, looking at Salesforce, these kind of platforms that have a ton of metadata that's all aggregated that you can really learn something from.
Yeah. And they break it down and make it easy to understand. It's not like you have to look at the results of a PhD grade study. It's very simple. They say out of these calls, these people are the most likely to buy. This is the commonality that they had. This is what can work, and they give you almost everything you need to interpret that study and make it actionable for yourself. So there's so many just amazing pieces of instantly actionable knowledge out there, like 7 to 13 points, right? Like change jobs in 90 days that you can do. And then when you start verifying that yourself, you realize that it's all legit.
Wow. So if somebody did want to like land a bigger corporate deal for their agency, like what's the sales cycle like? I know a lot of times, when you're dealing with multiple decision makers, it can be a lot longer, can be a lot more difficult to kind of get the deal over the edge. So, what's your advice to those people, and what's kind of the process that you found works best?
So there first I would say it can be a nightmare. All right, so there's a couple of books, and I don't remember off the top of my head one that I have the author's name, but not the book. I'll get that to you afterwards. Maybe you can pin it in the comments. Would highly recommend this book. It's really good. But the first thing I would say is if you are yourself in an org, get the support of somebody above you. If you're not in an org, get the support of somebody that the decision maker trusts. That can be absolutely vital to helping things go through. If you're landing deals for your agency, you say, "Hey, I just want to make a 10 or 15, maybe $20,000 a month retainer from corporate." That's fine. You shouldn't need multiple decision makers to approve that kind of deal.
Hmm.
Right. So the first thing is figure out where your deal sits and at what level of the organization you need to target.
Oh.
If you're doing one-off services or you have a package of 10,000, a director may be able to approve that. But if
Hmm.
you're going a recurring 10 or 15,000, you might have to get to the VP. So find out where in the org chart you need to be, contact that person, keep in contact with them, right? Especially if you started lower on the org chart, your goal is to move up to the level at which somebody can approve the decision and then to get it through compliance. These are two different steps.
Hmm.
If you have enough buy-in on the front side from enough people with pull who believe that your thing is going to work, they will help push it through the internal organization. But I've had decision makers say, yeah, this sounds good. They're interested, they're willing to give it a try, but they're not fervent fans. And what happens is that deal comes through, they can't just sign on the dotted line and send it to you. There's a process they have to go through internally to be it pushed through. And those guys, you know, a lot of people don't realize that corporate teams have a separate team that only does negotiations, right?
Hmm.
I'm a huge fan of negotiation, been studying it the field forever, involved in a lot of things with that. But that team is your enemy. They
Hmm.
are not trying to help you. They're not trying to make the best deal for both parties. They're trying to cut your deal down, save the company money. So
Hmm.
keep that in mind when you send these deals through is that you're going to have to include some things that you can cut to appease and make that other team look good because they're going to come after you like rabid dogs to get this done.
Hmm. So you're kind of baking things in that you're like willing to let go of to make the deal happen.
Dan Kennedy has a famous, very famous story. He puts in all of his contracts that the company has to send him 99 red hats. And people read that and they go, 99 red hats? And he's like, I'm sorry. Do you want to send me less? That's his reply, right? It's a red herring. It's something
Hmm.
that help give you something that they can give them to throw away so that you can get the rest of it through.
That's great. That's actually pretty hilarious.
All of these stories, and it's amazing things that you hear. I incorporate that, right? I heard once that pioneers get arrows in the back, and I took that to heart. So anything people share, I would rather learn from their experience than waste tens of thousands of my own dollars figuring it out on my own. There's so many things that you learn in business. You may hear it, but you internalize it on your own. Don't make sure the first time you hear it is when you're reviewing your own data. Suck up
Hmm.
as many things as you can, especially with the organizations, because I could tell you stories, and I'll share this with you and your audience. Make sure that when you're talking to these folks, don't ever have a corporate deal be the one thing you're pinning all your hopes to, because
Hmm.
depending on the size and the responsibility of the organization, the whole thing could fall through. We had a multi six figure deal that was effectively inked. The company they were going to go away for the weekend. They had a company retreat. When they came back, we were set to talk implementation and collect the checks. It was done. In that weekend, that company, and I'm not going to say the name of it because it really doesn't make them look good, but they had their retreat and they blew $100,000 in the Philippines.
Wow, that's like for the Philippines, man. That's like
A
10
hundred thousand
million.
dollars in a weekend. This retreat was maybe 4 or 5 people. Okay, so it's not like we're talking about a 500 folk organization. They
Wow.
really blew this money. What happened to the deal? The deal didn't go anywhere because they no longer had the funds to physically invest. And it took multiple weeks to find out what the real reason this collapsed at the nth hour was. This doesn't happen with companies like Chase, etc., because there are guards that would prevent them from doing such things.
Hmm.
But we don't often think that corporations or larger companies can be very new as well. And just because they have a corporate org chart doesn't mean that they have the same bylaws restricting them from doing crazy things
Makes sense. Yeah, there's like no financial controls and things can get off the rails.
real quick. Yeah. So, you have to keep that in mind. The other thing I would say with corporate deals is when you're talking to somebody, one thing they don't want to answer is they never want to answer what they can improve in terms of deal size.
Hmm.
That's precisely what you need to get because otherwise what happens is folks at the director, the president, the VP level, all of that, they often, they're authority figures. They have decision making powers on a daily basis, and sometimes I'd say probably in my experience, usually they don't want to necessarily admit that they don't have the power, pull, or influence that you think they do because that can be humiliating. So you have to get from them information on what they can and can't approve so you don't spend your entire time selling to a director when you really had to sell to a VP to get it done.
Mm, makes a lot of sense. So, kind of switching gears a little bit, like let's say that you're, talking to somebody who's at the six-figure level and, they want to scale up to seven figures. Like, what are a few kind of golden nuggets that you'd give that person who's like, how do I start really scaling this business now that I've seen a little bit of success?
Yeah, so there's a lot of folks who everybody's focused on the person who made six figures, scaling them to seven. But at six figures, you have a stable revenue base. I think a lot more folks are struggling to get to six figures. If you've made it to that point, you need to sit down and have a hard look at what worked for you and what were your expenses. There's a huge difference between making six and taking six home, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just because somebody says that they had an agency that did $1 million a year doesn't mean their operating costs weren't 1,000,001.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So you have to look at what were the most profitable deals that you've done. Look at your service. What were the things that customers liked and what got them results? Because I guarantee you there's a certain section of what you're doing that's costing you time and not giving them much benefit. Let me take the last deal that I personally did as an example. My wife is a travel nurse. We've been traveling the country. I'm currently in Washington, D.C. Couple months, who knows where I'll be, right? She is in love with her job and her profession, and I'm so grateful to be able to do what I do and go around and see her in hospitals all around doing just what she wants to do. We were in Maine, and the landlord there, because you rent furnished places. I don't buy a house every city I go to, right? That would be
Of
insane.
course.
He hired me to redo his marketing. And I thought, I'm like, okay, here's the plan. I'm going to do a website. I'm going to set up a funnel. I'm going to make sure that when people are looking for furnished housing, they're going to find you. I said, oh, yeah, you should probably also get listed on this aggregate site. Here are a couple of pieces of data that you need to know to do that well. He sent me that listing and said, hey, can you take a look at this? I sent him 1 2-minute video where I said, change your image, change your headline, add this stuff in here, and do that. That aggregate site has taken him from, I think he said like 70, 75% occupancy to 100%. Let him
Amazing.
raise his rents 20 to 30%. And
Wow.
he's still getting dozens of messages a week. All of his, he had 5 units, all of them are full.
Hmm.
I didn't think that that aggregate site was going to be the be all and end all of his problem, right? So I spent 80% of my time building the website, building the funnel, and everything, when in reality, he didn't need any of that. He just needed this thing over here. So then I looked at the service. I said, why don't I just sell the thing that I thought was ancillary that really gave him all the results? Because it's 20% of my time, and I'll just slash my price slightly to reflect the difference there so it looks good to them. And now my delivery time on that offer is a few hours and they
Hmm.
get the results they want. Well, I get 80% of the cash that was taking me many, many, many hours to generate.
Wow. So yeah, you're kind of analyzing like what's working, what's getting the best results. How do I kind of optimize in those two areas and then pretty much maximize the margin by not investing so much time or resources into what's actually working.
Yeah, maximize it for the client. That's
Hmm.
the thing. The agency is always like, oh, this is what generated me the most money. But a lot of folks never consider their own time or the resources they put into that deal as counting against it. You have to assign yourself an hourly wage in terms of figuring out how much a deal usually generates that's consistent with the market. If you're doing the work of a digital specialist within your agency on a deal, you need to price that. What do you pay a digital specialist these days? 30, 35, 40 an hour? You need to look at how many hours you spent on that and then times that by 1.5 because somebody you hired would not be the owner, and then look at the payroll cost, even if it's not a real cost. But look at the cost of that and say, this deal brought in 5, but I actually spent 4K, 4.5K to get it done. Whether
Hmm.
that money came out of your bank account or it came out of your lifespan, it was spent either way. So then you look at that deal made me $500, and then you realize why you're having problems scaling.
Hmm. Yeah, a really good book for this kind of stuff is Dan Martell's Buy Back Your Time. I was just chatting with somebody else who was a big advocate for that book. So highly recommend if you're in that position to like delegate and elevate yourself out of certain roles and figure out what your time's actually worth. That's a really good read.
Yeah. And we hear so much delegate, elevate yourself out of roles, work on the business, not in the business, right? But when you hear all these things, especially if you're a 1 to 5 person team, it doesn't really land because people use their time to substitute some of the things that they're doing. And sometimes you don't even realize it. Like if you do a task that takes you 10 seconds on every deal, you don't realize you're doing that. It's just part of the process. That's why I'm a big fan of hiring coaches and
Hmm.
not, and that's not a self plug, but people who can watch you do what you do can tell you about the things that you're missing. Experts in every field have huge blind spots where they think that what they're doing is either normal or that everybody knows it. Usually, in both cases, they're wrong.
100%. Yeah. So having that outside eye kind of helps you hone in the workflow and figure out, what you can actually do to really free up your time and make the most of it.
Yeah, yeah. And as far as if you're saying what other advice would you give to folks scaling, my favorite saying in business, I say this to everybody, all of my proteges. I say it to them consistently all the time. The people who pay the least expect the most, and the people
Mm.
who pay the most will respect your time. The first deals I had way back when in business were commission deals on products that I thought were going to be good, but I didn't understand how to structure a commission deal. So after they took out everything involved in the price of that item, literally down to the salary of the employees running the cash register at the shop that had nothing to do with what I was doing, the commission ended up being a few $100 because the margin was less than 1%. Not actually, but at the end. I was busting ass, and these people would consistently be in my inbox and in my team's inbox every day, multiple times a day, asking about things, wondering why things were done, questioning decisions when they didn't even know how to do it themselves. It was a nightmare.
Wow.
Upgraded to some clients who paid $10,000 a month. They didn't even show up for their monthly one on ones. They were happy. They just kept signing the check.
They're like, yeah, we're getting results. I trust you guys. We're good.
Yeah. And so consistent, a lot of people say, well, it's my first couple deals, or, I don't really want to deal with the stress of a larger deal. So I'm just going to discount my price. Instead of charging 5K a month, I'm going to charge 2K, or I'm going to charge, 750, just something. And I hear a lot, it's going to be a Netflix subscription. If you have to sell somebody on a $750 a month subscription, guarantee you that that means everything to them, right? If you go up
Hmm.
to somebody who has $1,000 and you ask them to pay $1,000 a month, how quickly do they have to get their money back? How stressed are they that you have every dime that they have? Now
Hmm.
you take something that's 10,000 and you take it to somebody who has billions. What do they care?
Right? Yeah, it's like pennies to them, basically.
Yeah. So it's definitely something to consider that dropping your price often increases your workload, increases your stress, and doesn't get you the money you want.
So yeah, charge a premium.
It's not even sometimes charge a premium, it's charge what you're worth. Like the
Mm.
most heartbreaking stories that I've heard from other consultants is they have a 37 or $50,000 program. The company who implemented that made $1.2 billion.
Dang.
How do you feel about your $50,000 price tag now?
Yeah, seems like peanuts.
You feel cheated, right?
Mm.
It's something I tell people all the time is there is very little difference on the client side between 100 times return, 1,000 times return, a 10,000 times return in terms of how happy they're going to be. If you work with me and you get 10 times your money back, you're going to be excited. If you work with me and get 100 times your money back, you're going to be excited. If you work
Mm.
with me and get 1,000 times your money back, you're going to be excited, right? But there's diminishing returns at this level to the point where effectively you're giving them things that they haven't paid for, and all that's happening is you're becoming poorer for the effort.
Makes a lot of sense, man. Yeah. Another thing that you mentioned earlier that I wanted to touch on was like the whole scaling process at the expense of like the success of the business, right? So you mentioned some people who try to scale up, but then their margins really thin out and it's like not even really worth it. So yeah, what advice would you give somebody where they're like, it's like kind of like why do you want to scale? Like why do you want to do this? What's in it for you? And like how do you kind of keep track of making sure the business still maintains a high level of profitability as you're in that growth mode.
So I'll take this back to one of my actual observations that I've had and something that I put out there. I call it the bomb phase of an agency. So what happens is you get good at selling. You craft an offer that sells, you put that before people who sells, and then you start making $10,000, $20,000 a month retainers, right? Maybe not from one company, maybe you have it split between a few. And you get these folks in. But what happens is during the process of selling them, you've overpromised what you can do, or you've sold something to somebody that is what they wanted, not what you could deliver. Huge
Mm,
difference,
hmm
massive difference.
hmm
So what happens is the bomb goes off, and all of these deals they become troubled. You say, this guy's pausing, he wants me to work for free for a month to recoup the money. This guy's willing to give me a 30-day trial. This guy's canceling. This guy's results aren't doing that okay. He hasn't talked about canceling when he's going to leave. And so you start going down your chart of clients, and all of them are starting to look red and not very good. And this is what I've seen with almost every single new agency. Any bit agency under 5 years, in my experience, has done this, almost all of them. So then you look at, well, what do I do now? The answer that they come up with is, well, I need to sell quicker to get more people in the door. That's the reason that most agencies turnaround is 30%. They lose a client usually every 3 months consistently. That's almost always the turnaround for this. So when you're talking about scaling, the reason margins thin out so much is because people throw everything they can with the money they're getting, either in just making payroll or trying to fix the problems that they didn't know how to fix for these people that they've now promised to do. And this is the consistent experience of almost everyone. What you should do instead is only deliver things that are easy for you to deliver at a very high level. Because if it's easy for you and it's going to get them massive results, they're going to be very happy with that. You're not going to make as many sales because you're not selling them what they think they need. That whole sell them what they think they need is a giant line of shit. Because what happens is then they expect you to deliver what they think they need, and you know that's not what they need, and that's not what they need. So it's not going to get them the results, and you're going to end up with the bottom problem. Instead, sell them on the dream of having the problem fixed and then sell them on your solution as the bridge to solving that problem. Don't sell them on the solution that they think it is. Sell them on the solution that you know it is. You'll close less clients, but the profitability will be far, far higher. And then you can afford to invest in ads to get more of the folks in. You can take more meetings, make a far higher margin, and not have to pull your hair out at night wondering how you're going to make payroll from people constantly leaving your door.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And it gets you off that cycle of like oversell, underdeliver, that you're just kind of constantly running in that hamster wheel.
And it happens every new agency. And sometimes it's not like it's malicious. People genuinely go into these deals believing that they can deliver this. They say, well, I can do this. This seems very similar, right? If somebody has like a physical location and you crush on ecom ads, like ecom is amazing. You say, well, all physical location is generating leads for folks to walk in the door over here. They're very alike, but they're so different once you get into
Mm.
the details. How do you get people to show up? How do you track that it's working? What happens with their sales? A lot of what we do as agencies or consultants depends on the underlying processes of the business. And depending on the business, that may not exist. Maybe the reason their sales floor isn't doing any money is because their salespeople suck.
Mm.
Are you now going to also become a sales consultant to teach all of their salespeople? So then you have to fly out and do that, convince the client to pay you to fly out, and then convince salespeople who have been there 10 years that they're actually bad, right? It's a very hard thing to do versus just stay in your ecom lane, deliver those things, get massive results, and then maybe the business owner says this physical location isn't working out, and he doesn't renew his lease.
Hmm. So yeah, what do you think is the kind of like the underlying principle of overselling? Do you think it's like people pleasing, scarcity mindset, where it's like, oh, I need this money, I need to close this deal, or just like wanting to be accepted by that person and kind of like get them on board? What do you think is kind of like the main cause of people that actually causes them to sell somebody into a service that they can't actually fulfill on very well?
At first, I think it's just wanting that validation, wanting to know that what you're selling is valuable, wanting to know that people are willing to pay it, and then you need the money. But oftentimes, when folks are starting a business, usually they have another income source. They have a job, they have savings, they have something else that they are using to get by. So at first, it's not about payroll, it's about wanting to just get started. People say all the time, well, I know this isn't exactly what I wanted to do, but I just want to get my first client in and figure it out. And once he's happy, I'll go from there. But that guy's not going to be happy if you have sold him something that you don't know how to do.
Hmm.
So then you look at, okay, well, what happens? That's the first few deals. Why do people continue doing that? At that point, it's because they've created a monster that has to be fueled. You have software that you're signing up for, you have ads that you're paying, you have people that you're paying, you have hard costs, you have payroll costs, you have consulting that you're paying for to try to fix this issue. So you have this continuously growing need of money. You have the system that needs fuel. It has to have fuel to keep going, and you have to keep fueling it, even though the system may not be outputting the results that you want it to. It has to be fed for you to believe that you're going to be able to solve the problem. And the system runs until one of two things happen: either everybody leaves, you can't feed it, or you eventually fix the issue, which is not something I've seen very often. And usually that comes from hiring somebody who knows how to do that thing, teaching you how to do it right. So it's really desperation at the end, is that they have to keep selling it in order to keep feeding the beast.
Hmm. And yeah, that's kind of how things kind of get out of control, get off the rails. They're on the hamster wheel. Their business becomes kind of a nightmare and they don't love doing it anymore. And the whole thing just,
And this is a lot of folks, a lot of folks. So many people I talk to like that. There's a contact I had, again, I won't say his name. He was in business for a number of years, and I was talking to him one day, and I was shocked to find out that he makes about 65, 70K annually. That was his business. But his margin was like 90%. He
hmm,
was super happy, right? And he was learning to scale, but he was doing it slowly. The clients he had stayed on with him for a fair amount of time, and that business was healthier than so many other businesses I've talked to that said, that they're at six or multi six figures. And then you look under the hood and you find out that the engine is really, really bad.
hmm. Yeah, I mean, I've even worked on some offers that do like 1 to 2 million a month, and it's very ego driven in that they're like, we want to make like 2.5 million a month now, and they just pump more and more money into ads, the margins wane, and it's just the feeling that they have of making the money and the fact that they can say I made this much money when really, the margins are thinning out and they'd be better off doing like, even 1 million a month, 500K a month at like a much, much higher margin.
Yeah. What a very common tactic years ago was to get on ClickFunnels, was to design a program, run money through the funnel, and so at about a 40% return. So you put in 1 million, you make 400,000 back, so you can get your 2 Comma Club award. You take that award, you slap it someplace else, and then you show that to folks to get a higher ticket sale, delivery, etc. And then you've technically earned that award, but not really, because you haven't made 1 million and
Mm,
functional, but they've got the accolades and the social proof now to land higher level gigs. That was something that was very common in 2018 all the way through 2020. It might still be something folks do today. So they do that kind of thing, just like you said, for ego, for other purposes, to win that social proof. Sometimes a company will throw everything they have, they'll run in the red to show a case study that went through the roof, knowing that they'll never be able to replicate that, because the amount of resources they put into that is not something they'll ever be able to do again. But that case study allows them to sell many, many times that in courses that won't get the results that that guy did.
That's insane. It's super unsustainable and kind of like downright dishonest in some ways.
It is, which is why many facets of that are illegal in the FTC.
Hmm.
But
That makes sense.
they don't, they're the odds of getting busted by the FTC are very small. When you do, it's life ruining. But that's the reason that people don't, they don't pay attention. It's because, do you buy a lottery ticket? No. Well, this is like the reverse of the lottery. So,
Literally, yeah, it can really mess you up. And yeah, so many people are doing things that aren't compliant, but they kind of just get away with it. I think when you get to a certain level, they have more optics on you.
yeah,
So you kind of
the
get away with it when you're small, but then like if you blow up and you're making millions and millions, then it's like you got to be really careful.
I'd say to agencies who are looking around and comparing yourselves to your competitors, because everybody does it, right? Unless you're in a blue ocean and there's nobody else doing what you're doing, everybody's going to do it. When you look around and look at their case studies and you go, damn, how did that company do that? You might want to consider one of two things: either that they did it unsustainably or that they didn't do it at all. When we started our Amazon agency, one of the biggest guys in the field was named Kevin David. He had a Facebook group called FBA Ninjas. I love that group. I was in there giving away free information almost daily just because I genuinely believe in the rise. I love the underdog story. I always have. So I give away as much as I can to those folks to help them succeed.
Hmm.
And he was putting out courses on how his students made this, that, and the other, or how he did it himself and his product launches. And I'm sitting here as a guy who's really working in the field day in and day out, looking at those numbers and say, I don't understand how he did that.
Hmm.
Years go by. Fun fact, he didn't do that. All of those screenshots were manufactured. Almost all of the information in his courses were lies. He was sued. He was found guilty. He didn't, he like, as far as I'm aware, he had to admit guilt as part of the plea deal. So he was guilty. It wasn't a thing where he just paid them to go away. Right. And then
Wow.
the whole group collapsed as far as I'm aware. I don't even know if it's still running. Kevin Davis nowhere to be found. He had a CoffeeZilla story on the scams he did sometime later.
Wow. Yeah, I was gonna say I haven't heard about that guy in a long time, and
That's
I
why.
had no idea that's how it went for him. That's insane.
Yeah, it was manufactured, almost all of it. So I'm sitting here going, man, what does he know that I don't? Because I'm charging people for this information, and I feel like I should know a lot of cutting edge stuff, but I can't get these results. The answer was nobody could.
Wow. So, I mean, that kind of speaks to the state of the industry a little bit, where, like, we kind of had this era of people coming through with these crazy promises. And, even with Hormozi's book, $100 million offers, like, everyone's got these crazy guarantees now. So, when it comes to overcoming the trust hurdle with these business owners who are getting bombarded every single day by marketers, what's like your best advice for people to actually, overcome that trust hurdle? Not overpromise and like not put themselves in a position where they kind of like look like an idiot in the long run because they made some stupid guarantee that they could never fulfill on.
A couple of facets to your question there. Let's take the trust piece first. It's very painful to watch back your own Zoom recordings because you hate to hear. I hate the sound of my own voice, right? In my mind, I think I sound like, a top celebrity Hollywood actor, Earl Jones voice, right? That's not how I actually sound. And I hate to be confronted with the sound of my own voice outside that recording. But it's extremely valuable to listen to your own sales calls. Pause it in the middle and ask yourself, if you were to get up, walk off, put somebody else's face on your body, would the conversation make sense? And for a lot of folks, it does, which means that what they're selling and how they're selling it is the same thing everybody else is doing. You need a personality. You have to be polarizing in every facet of what you do. When people ask me how it's going, I have a very measured response. I say, I'm busy as spit on a hot rock, but that's a good thing. My grandmother taught me that. You're like, well, does these little sayings actually make you different? Yes, they really do. Because people attach to that and they're like, man, this guy is different. It throws off their guard, it lowers
Hmm.
the walls, it allows you to have a real conversation, and you should be having real conversations with folks. The best clients that I've closed are ones I had a real conversation with about what they were doing and were very candid with them. Some folks have asked, I want to buy X from you. And I have straight up told them on the sales call, If that's what you want, I'll sell it to you. It will not fix your problem. You will think it's a waste of money, but I'll give it to you if that's what you want. And then they go, what? They don't expect you to be open and honest and direct with them. And that's the way that I overcome this. Show your personality, have a personality to show, right?
Hmm.
And then as you're going through that, be as candid as you can with their risks, what's going on. And then at the end of it, do what you can to reverse those risks. Money back guarantees are worthless before you've outlined the risks of what somebody's going to take, because it's like, oh yeah, they tune that out. They don't understand or they don't conceptualize in that moment how valuable that actually is. You say, you know, so many people say, yeah, it's five K to me, $5,000 a month to the ad spend. So the guy's going, oh, okay. Now he's thinking that he could lose $10,000 a month. But they pitched the guarantee before this, right?
Hmm.
So when you're talking about how do you not overpromise, deliver your promises and your guarantees and your features when it's time, not before. When he's thinking about, okay, I could lose $10,000 a month, literally say, and now you're thinking if this doesn't work, you could lose 10K a month. You know what he's thinking. You've sat in his seat before. And then the guy's going to go, damn, he really understands me. I think anybody could understand that. And you say, here's what I would want to hear, and here's the truth of what I'm telling you in your situation. Facebook takes their money no matter what. You get that data no matter what. That data is always going to teach you something no matter what. The lesson and the value of the lesson is usually far more than 5,000. I can't guarantee Facebook's money. I can guarantee you that the money that you paid me to learn that, if this doesn't work, you'll get all of that back. And when I give that back to you, you'll be the first person to ever get that back because nobody's claimed on this offer. If you've never had to do a refund, highlight that. No guarantee is totally encompassing unless you overpromise and put your ass on the line. But if you highlight the piece that you're doing and the certainty you have that you won't have to deliver, folks respond to that.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I see a lot of coaches teaching guarantees and like, especially on the front end of the offer to generate calls so that like they have, something they can really sink their teeth into and draw interest. But the problem I'm seeing is a lot of agencies take that and they make a guarantee that they can't really fulfill on. So they might promise like X number of leads per month or X number of jobs per month, but then there's all these crazy conditions and it's like again slightly dishonest in my opinion. I don't know, what's your take on like when to implement the guarantee and making sure you can actually fulfill on it?
The question is, what are you using the guarantee for? All right. So I just did a Facebook post on this a while ago because I found it was hilarious. Huge pizza company in the US, maybe elsewhere, called Little Caesars. Their marketing is 3 words: hot and ready.
Hmm.
Now, here's what that doesn't tell you, which I find absolutely hysterical. It doesn't tell you their pizza's good. It doesn't tell you people like it. It doesn't tell you that it's the best. It doesn't tell you that it's affordable. I actually think Little Caesars is the most trash food in the world. They don't advertise that they're good. So that tells you they may at some level agree with what I'm saying, right?
Hmm.
But it's there and it's right there. If you eat that and have a problem with it or you take a couple of bites and you don't want it, they may, like all companies, they may have a refund policy. But to get you to buy that pizza, did they come up to you and say, it's hot and ready, and if you don't like it, we'll give you your money back?
No.
No, because they know, one, they're going to have to pay out on that delivery that because it's not that good, and two, they didn't need to, right? It just took away from the message. So when
Mm.
you look at your message, what are you actually messaging folks? Is their number one concern the risk? And the M&A business and acquiring businesses, investors often their number one concern is what's the risk involved in buying this business. Mitigating risk to them has immense value. Somebody trying to get customers, their primary focus isn't necessarily the risk, it's the results. So why are you confusing their secondary objective and secondary risk with their primary one? So oftentimes I tell folks, Look at your guarantees and what they're designed to do. Are they distracting from your message or are they enhancing them? Right? I mean, lead gen companies is just such a perfect example of how you can scroll Facebook and get 10 million of them in the span of 2 minutes. As soon as you start an agency, that's all you see all the time forever. And the
Hmm.
guarantees just get to more and more consistently crazy levels, right? Back to that cub common, unbelievable, and boring. And they hit all three like it's a goalpost. They do it on purpose. You know, if if you don't make money with me, I'll fly out to your location. I'll work for free. I'll give you all your money back. I'll buy you lunch. It's like, do I believe you're going to do that? No, I don't. Right.
Yeah, there's no way.
And on top of that, you're offering me leads again. Who wants leads? Some of these guys say, I will generate and close. I'll bring you clients. We'll sell them. All you have to do is deliver. Some folks don't even believe that. It's unbelievable. That industry is hard to get into. It solves a problem every business has. But because of the way it's been positioned, it's very hard to look at those offers. So you have to ask yourself, what is my guarantee doing? Is it pushing customers away or is it bringing them toward me?
Mm, smart. So one other thing that we touched on as we're winding down here, you mentioned monitoring kind of like client health. Like you said, the agency bomb goes off when like all these clients start to get into the red. So what tools and tips do you have for people for like monitoring client health, and if they're at a certain size and they have kind of like CSMs, client success managers, how
Mm,
to make sure that all that is accurate and true?
great question. I love this question. So, one of the things that I really harp is keep a personal relationship with the clients. Fun fact for you, whether somebody cancels oftentimes has nothing to do with the results they're getting at the moment. It has everything to do with whether or not they expect to get those results in the future.
Hmm.
If you do everything right and you deliver everything you promised, and you've worked with a client for a couple of months and you've come to the end of the list of things you were doing for them and they feel good and everything was good and they're making money from your program, they will cancel on you
Hmm.
because they think that they've got everything that you have to offer. They bought the bag, they bought the pony, so to speak. They have what they want. They've ridden it around. They think it's good. They're very happy with the purchase. They don't want to keep buying the same pony over and over again. So when you're looking at how do you keep these customers' success health up, it starts with the relationship you have with the customer and it starts with leading. As a business, especially as a consultant or agency, you are viewed as and you are paid for your expertise, which makes you by de facto a leader in that area. Nobody wants to be led, and the 2024 elections prove this beyond a shadow of a doubt. The one thing everybody says about the camp on the right was they did not tell people where they wanted to take them. Right, their message was not very clear. So you have to make sure that the message you give folks is clear. That what you're telling them and what you're showing them, you have a game plan. Everyone that I work with, I require them as part of doing this before I'm even going to teach you to land customers to develop a 90-day timeline for what you're going to do when you're going to do it with them. I call it a roadmap. Every client should have a roadmap and it should be for the next at least 90 days. And you should continuously make new ones and include new features, new products, new things that you can deliver. Or you should accept that at this point in time, my expertise and knowledge has finished. This particular product for this client is done. Let them go. Don't keep them on paying you retainers forever and consistently try to do things you don't know how to do just to get their money. Because if you have a good relationship with them and you let them go and you learn or develop a new program, you can come back and sell them at a higher price for a better margin later than you could if you keep them on until you sour the relationship by milking the
Uh-huh.
cow far past the point that anybody wants the milk.
That makes a lot of sense. So yeah, it's about kind of continuously painting this vision for the future and kind of having like this quarterly vision that they can kind of see and buy into and stay a part of what you're doing. and then knowing also when it's time to say, okay, this is like the best I can do for you, and it's time to move on.
Right. And that's not a bad thing saying, I have delivered what I promised. They're super happy. This is a good relationship and leave. I had a client in my early agency days who described our service as the best money they have ever spent. We were charging them at that time $1,000 a month. It wasn't a ton of work. We were a new agency, right? We were just getting our feet. We were trying to figure that out. I didn't know any of the lessons that I just talked to you about. And it was great. We as a company ran into some financial problems and we said, hey, we can do video ads and we can charge a premium for that. I went to these clients, I had a sit down lunch with them. They said, we're a little bit scared about this, but it went so well on the last thing. We're going to go ahead and upgrade that. And it didn't go well because we hadn't truly tested and verified and got a great strategy for the videos. So a few months later, that client was gone. So that $1,000 a month we had disappeared and that relationship was soured. I tried to bring them into other programs that we had verified even for free later on. They didn't trust us anymore. And that was, and to me, one of the most heartbreaking things about it was that as much as you develop a relationship with them and they develop a relationship with you, that goes both ways. You want to see them succeed. And when that sours, it hurts. Like anybody who cares about their business, it hurts when clients don't get results and they feel betrayed, especially if that wasn't your intention.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So yeah, maintaining those relationships, super important. Making sure you can deliver on what you're offering and not just like inventing new things for the sake of, trying to increase the LTV of a client per se.
Yeah, inventing new things that are unproven and then trying to sell it to them. It's okay to do that if you set them aside and say, this is a separate thing. I have this idea. I want to run this. I'm going to give it to you at a beta price for this much. I don't know if you're going to make your money back on this. Here are your risks. Here are your potential returns. This is totally separate. Really outline every facet of what you do rather than presenting it as, oh, I'm also an expert in this. And
Mm,
then they can say yes or no. But when your main offer is done, let them go. I promise you, people think their LTV is how long their credit card is in your system being charged. It's really the lifetime of the customer. If they're on retainer with you for 2 years, you've done what you can do, there are things looking good, it's obvious they can do it themselves, let them go. You can come back to them later, maybe in 6 months, maybe a year. Things have changed in your market, they're not doing as well. Oftentimes they'll reach out to you, right? Or you've developed a new thing, you've added a new offer, you can reach back out to them and get them signed up again. You don't have to keep paying, having them pay you to keep a relationship.
mm, makes sense. So yeah, I guess kind of winding things down here, there were like three pieces of advice that you would give to the agency owners who are listening, who are like looking to bring on more clients, they want to increase their revenue, and they ultimately want to build like a seven-figure business. What advice would you give them with where they're at now?
Go to where the customers live to find your customers. Number one, make sure that you go to the watering hole to bring those folks in. Number two, bring in the right folks by promising them what you can do. Right. It's again, we've talked a lot about that, but that avoids the bomb problem. I've had a number of agencies who have worked with me who have said they can do X. Turns out they can't. 6 months in, they go from $20,000 a month to four. You don't, and this is a common problem. You don't want
Mm,
this, right? Promise what you can deliver, what you're good at, and what you can do in your sleep, because those are things that will get you to where you're going. And the last piece of that is make sure that you maintain a relationship and show a clear outlook of where you're taking somebody. It's the same way you have a roadmap for them, you should have a roadmap for yourself. Follow your own roadmap. It's funny because oftentimes I see the coaches who the people who are actually genuinely very good at getting business for other folks struggle to get business for themselves because they don't take their own advice. So I guess the third point would encapsulate to take your own advice. Follow
mm,
if you're really good at it, apply it to yourself too.
100%, man. Well, it's been great having you on, Charles. If people want to stay connected with you or learn more about you, what's the best way that they can do that?
So I watch my Facebook like a hawk. Charles Starr, just send me a friend request. Happy to chat. Happy to give out information for free. Honestly, I don't do this anymore, like coaching, talking about agencies for the money. I do it because I love the come up. I love the underdog story, right? Like it's amazing how one piece of advice can change somebody's life. And then that feeling of seeing them change and being so grateful is honestly what I thrive on.
Oh, beautiful. All right. So you guys want to connect with Charles, head over to Facebook, type in Charles Starr, add him as a friend, connect with him
Oh,
there.
start with two R's. That's right.
Brilliant. Well, yeah, it's been great having you on, man. Thanks so much for connecting and looking forward to doing this again sometime.
For sure. Thanks.